right, Country Maid, it is that time. It is my pleasure to announce myself. That's Cousin Jim. I don't know if this is going before Saban or after Saban, but either way, no matter how you look at it, I guarantee you he probably did some terrible intro about him being better, the cousin number one. Probably fell on deaf ears and no one cared over there. But hope you guys are having an amazing day so far. Whether this is morning, midday, or evening, hopefully we can add a little piece to your overall experience that is fun, enjoyable, and hopefully some good little insights. The few things I want to talk to you about personally, and where I will start, is that the concept and principles of kind of, hard work, hustle, grind, because for me personally, that's kind of really a big piece of who I am as a human being from young age to current day. I think it's just kind of instilled in me. It's how I was raised by my parents in Maine. And I think everybody's obviously raised in many different ways. But that was always something, these subtle messages that I had received from my folks along the way. It's kind of this idea when we speak sometimes about that idea of clawing your way to the top. And we say that because of lobster claws, but ultimately the idea that anything you want to attain, wherever you want to go, whatever you dream, whatever you want to do, I personally believe is something that you can attain, a goal that you can always reach, and wherever you want to be that you can get there. It comes with that principle and that mindset of hard work. So whether it's you guys in your jobs and your roles, current day or in the future, I don't think there is any better piece of advice or any better ingredient than the just down and dirty piece of hard work. So I'll give you a couple examples for me as a kid. Again, like Saban mentioned, we came from humble beginnings. My family didn't have much, but what they had obviously was love, the loyalty, the trust, and the family aspect. And I think my mom and father really ingrained in me that kind of, hey, if you desire something, whether it be something you want to buy or some job you want in the future or something that you want to achieve, you can get it as long as you put in the effort. For me, as a kid, I loved playing hockey. I actually didn't start until I was about 10 or 11 when all of my other friends probably started around the age of 5 or 6. But that became my love and passion. I played ice hockey. And eventually my goal was to play Division I college hockey. So if you take a step back, I started 5 or 6 years after all my friends, so I had a lot of catching up to do. And I think, my father's mentality here, my father grew up in a real poor family, raised by a single mother, and he didn't have the means to go play a sport like hockey that maybe cost a little bit more, so he was baseball. He had a glove, a bat, and a baseball, but he knew that just putting in the effort and the time was something that I would need to do if I wanted to kind of catch up to where my friends were when we were that age, 10, 11, 12, and also have a potential career in it to some capacity, or at least get to college. So really it was just about putting my head down and working to make up that ground. I was not the most talented kid specifically within hockey. I didn't have the most, the nicest hands or the most finesse, but I knew that what I didn't have in a skill, I could make up because, like I said, even then I was willing to outwork everybody. And I think where that came from was just spending time literally around my mom and dad and seeing what they were doing. For me, my father, we used to we had black labs, and he would have a couple of them be hunting dogs when we were younger. And I always remember waking up real early in the morning on my weekends as a 7 or 8, 9-year-old, and we would go to the marsh in Maine, and I'd have the little decoys that my father would have, and I'd just be sitting there ultimately training our dogs for duck hunting. And at the time, I didn't realize what that was all about, but I knew that I was going to do effort and work as a youngster that maybe other people weren't. I didn't really know what my father was teaching me at the time, but later I understood that I was putting in helping with him, staying disciplined and doing things ultimately that maybe some other of my friends were not doing. And then there came a time when I was 10, and I did start playing hockey every weekend. My father actually had me become a janitor at his church. He belonged to the Greek Orthodox Church in Portland, Maine. He would go to mass for like 3 or 4 hours, which is crazy to think about how long that is. And then I would come in around one in the afternoon, and my father and I, for literally about 8 years of my life, every Sunday, would go in. We would vacuum. I'd mop the floors. I'd clean the toilets, clean the sinks. I would wipe down the pews, dust, vacuum, mop, you name it. We did it. It took about 3 hours. But for me, it wasn't about the time or making a little bit of earnings. It was about the value behind it. It was the fact that I then had to go play hockey those evenings, or that if I played hockey in the morning, I then had to go to the church and do 3 hours of work. And to me, for a person at my age, that was quite the workload. When I was exhausted from having just skated or played 2 or 3 games, my father always made me, in a nice way, go do my work. And he said, listen, this is a responsibility that I've got to be accountable for, and I've got to make sure that that church is as clean as a restaurant is now, that we expect, or that our trucks are now, as before Mass started. So it's really about not taking shortcuts, is making sure that I'm staying up with everything that was my duty to carry out. It didn't matter what I personally did before, playing hockey or running around with my buddies. That was my job. To me, for 8 years or so, that really instilled the work ethic for me, the hustle, the grind. And it's just something that I believe is different than maybe what some of my friends were doing. And ultimately, the way I kind of look at it now, some 15, 20 years later, is it wasn't just about me doing it. I had my father, who was 50 years old, I guess at the time, 40, 45, 50, 55 years old over the course of those 10 years. Man with a full-time job, Monday through Friday. The guy hauling me around to hockey tournaments all around New England, all throughout the weekend. And then going to Mass, raising his family, providing, and he would be in there cleaning with me as well, because he wanted me to learn those principles and what it really meant to work hard. So to me, that is one of the biggest core items that trained me as a youngster kind of growing up, and why I think it's imperative to have that piece. Another example that I'd give you is actually about my days of playing street hockey. Because keep in mind, the reality here is that I was doing these things to try and achieve or trying to get somewhere. I always wanted to play college hockey, like I said. There's Division III, there's Division I. I wanted to play Division I. Don't know why. I just said, hey, this is the top, this is the best, and it's a small percent of people throughout the country and North America that get to do so. And like I said, I wasn't the most talented. So how could I get there? Well, the majority of my high school career in a small little town in Maine called Cape Elizabeth, I went to high school there, and it's a public school, and everyone has their own kind of distractions in high school. For me, I was just trying to be laser focused. So what that meant is that on Friday afternoons, Friday evenings, when a lot of the kids in any high school would probably get together, maybe they sneak off in the woods and go drinking or whatever, they get into extracurricular activities, they go to parties, they do whatever it may be. That's the fun time of your life in high school. And for me, I pretty much avoided all of that. And what I would do, where you could find me on a Friday night, would be at the track at high school when it was quiet. There was no cars in the parking lot anymore, nothing going on. But I was sitting there doing my cardio exercises, my strength and conditioning, plyometrics, whatever it was, to make my legs stronger, to make my lungs better, to make me more of an athlete, so that when I got on the ice, again, maybe I'm faster than somebody because I did those workouts on a Friday and Saturday when they were out drinking or just sitting on their couch and eating potato chips. Maybe I've got more endurance or leg strength so that I can play more minutes in a given game that will compensate or take over for somebody in ice hockey that might have really nice hands or maybe a little bit more offensive upside. Those are the things I relied on, also knowing full well that a lot of people at my age, when I was in my teens, would weed their way out, right? They just work against themselves. They were their own worst enemy. They'd get into drugs or drinking, they'd have problems in school, they'd drop out, or they'd just lose their motivation because something else was the shiny object that they went this way or that way. And they'd stop focusing on the sport that I was focusing on. And over the course of time, I think that really paid off. I would continue to do that. And by the time I was actually a junior in high school, I went away to a boarding school in New Hampshire called Exeter Academy, where I really felt aligned with players and students' kind of mentality of always wanting to be the best at whatever that may be, whatever their passions were, whatever their interests were. And then that is where I kind of just continue to fine-tune my trade. So to me, a very long way of saying that hard work, that effort, that grind, and the focus will allow you to get where you like to be. So the end of this story ultimately is that I played 2 more years, junior and senior year at Exeter, and I went on to play and fulfill my dream as a college Division I athlete at a school called Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. To me, I just think it was a dream come true, that when I look back over all of the time, probably 15 years or so of effort and commitment, and maybe a lot of the things I didn't get to do along the way, family vacations, hanging out more with friends and family, because it was contributing to hockey or to that kind of grind, to me it was all worth it, because that's what I wanted to do. So whatever it was, or whatever it is, for you in your business and your personal life, I would implore you to really just say any of it is possible, especially if you just focus on that personal piece of work. The other thing that I'd like to mention is the preparation. I'm a firm believer, Sable will make fun of me a lot for this, in preparation. I think it is key for everything you do in your life. It can be the most nominal, small little thing throughout your days, or it could be the big interview, it could be the big job you're going for, the business you want to start, the sales that you want to execute and convert on, anything at all. Preparation is key. In 2001, my high school hockey coach at Exeter said, if you're prepared, you have nothing to worry about. And when you think about that, it's so basic, so simple, but if you're prepared, you have nothing to worry about. Why is that? Well, if you put in all of the work and the effort, if you do all your research, if you do your diligence, all of this combined ultimately gives you as much knowledge, education, information so that you can be best prepared to give yourself the chance to succeed, to win, to convert. That's why there's nothing to worry about anymore. Do everything you can on the front end, and when you walk in the office for the interview, you walk into the office for me as a medical device rep, to try and get a sale from a doctor or a hospital. You walk into Shark Tank, you're under the lights. That to me is when the spotlight's on you and you have a chance to make it happen or not make it happen, you've got far of a better chance, obviously, being prepared. So some of the things I would speak about when it comes to preparation is, I guess, the different styles. When I was working at Strike Orthopedics, I would sell medical device parts, hips, knees, implants, nails, plates, screws, for your wrists, for your ankles, big joints and small. What that was all about then as a young kid out of college was ultimately you're selling the surgeon to be using your product. So if the surgeon was a Nike guy, but you sold Adidas shoes, you had to take this surgeon who was a long, trained and tenured Nike user, make them understand what Adidas was all about. Why is this shoe better? Why is it more comfortable? Why is it a better fit? Why is it better for the patient? How might you be able to save some costs? It's a very competitive space if any of you are familiar with it, but it's also a really interesting career where you get to go into the operating room and see your implant actually be deployed and implanted into patients. So for me, it was always about that eagerness and the preparation to be ready to go execute and grow my business. I thought that if I was doing that, if I was hitting my quota, then guess what? My manager would be happy, my manager would look good, and the ownership would be happy and allow me to kind of grow, do better, earn more, but ultimately have the autonomy and empowerment that I personally desired. So what that meant for me yet again on Friday and Saturday nights when I was living in Boston, it wasn't always going out with my buddies. A lot of it was just the excitement that in my brain I manifested to say, okay, I'm gonna go Google all these surgeons. I had 10 hospitals. I'd Google hand surgeons, foot surgeons, hip surgeons. And part of being a little bit green in the industry as a recent college grad was that I didn't know what I didn't know. And that allowed me the opportunity to just kind of dive headfirst in. So I'd Google all these surgeons, not knowing which product they use, but I would write them down on my Excel sheet, and I would devise my business plan, my mode of attack, how I was going to go after these people, how I was going to get in front of them. And that to me was just, a lot of it for me as a person is putting it down on paper, putting it in Excel, putting it in a document that says this is how I'm going to attack it. And that's exactly what I did. So I'd be providing my managers with these kind of business plans, mode of attack, saying this is how I am preparing to target these surgeons in these hospitals. This is how I'm going to find them. This is how I'm going to get in front of them, because that was half the battle, as it is with any sale. And this is what I'm going to do when I get in the room. And I think that's one of the biggest things in sales or in life, is that you can put an idea down, you put a target down, but how are you going to get in front of them? When the door is locked, when the assistant says no solicitation, or the surgeon's busy or out to lunch, what do you do on the 10th time when they say, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so is out to lunch? It's always about refining that approach and that stick-to-itiveness, or the perseverance, persistence, whatever you want to call it, to try again. Because at some point, it is going to work. You are going to get there. And then when you sit down with them, you might have something in common that no one else did. For me, what I always relied on was being ethical, being personable, not being salesy when I got in the room, and really just wanting to retain and learn information from them. And it kind of spun the tables a little bit as to how they appreciated me as a non-salesy, let me save you money here, let me get you this type of guy, to more someone that they could trust. And so to me, that was kind of the preparation work that I would do at Stryker that certainly helped me in my career there. In terms of Cousins Bay Lobster, as you heard Sabin say, like this, earlier, this started as a passion project, but it was an idea that we were both excited about. Did it have legs? We weren't really sure at the time, but for us, again, we had to prepare to make sure that we gave it the best opportunity. So specifically with Shark Tank, I always think they were fun little stories. We shared some of them with you earlier, but we'd write down every card. What is that like sitting in your room or the one bedroom in California when the sun is out, the beach is waiting for you, it's a beautiful weather, especially a kid from the East Coast when it was snowing and freezing there. We could have been out doing that, but instead we were focused on preparing for the Shark Tank piece. So we sat in a dark one bedroom and just watched 50 episodes back and over and over and over and over again until you just got numb. But we made sure that we had all the information possible. Question on one side, answer on the other. Things that we couldn't find from TV, we Googled, we'd call people, we'd find out all of the bits and pieces so that we knew every shark as an individual, from their childhood, their high school, their early jobs, how they made their money, any investments they've made, so that we could ultimately be up there when the spotlight's on and they're targeting us with questions. We could be calm, rational, professional. There's an interesting little story. Barbara actually tells us that the sharks have little earpieces in, and the producers are talking to them, and a lot of times they try to get some of the contestants a little bit razzed up. They'll try and get a little emotion out of them, a little drama, and kind of poke the bear a little bit. Well, the producers kept saying to them, try and get these guys to show something, get them a little high or low or whatever it may be. And when they'd ask us questions or when they try and stimulate it that way, we always just kind of stayed even keel, and that was because we felt very confident, not cocky, but confident that we knew our business, because we learned that inside and out in every piece before we went on. We knew the sharks, we knew the show, so we felt that whatever was coming to us, we almost knew the answer as it was being asked of us. So again, we just felt like we had that whole confidence in our business, and therefore our delivery could be calm, rational, professional, eloquent, and we just stayed right here. So they didn't get the peaks and the valleys. They didn't get us off our game where we might then become negative, or where we'd sound egotistical or unappreciative. So again, I think that was a huge learning curve for us at the very beginning of our business. And I think it kind of paved the way for what we've done since. If you think back to it, no business school, no history of really anything like a Shark Tank, but what we did know, and what you guys know, you know that at the core you need to be a good person, and that if you If you've done the work, you're going to give yourself the best chance for success. If you don't, you'll be caught with your pants down. It's basically that simple. So we said, hey, of all the things we don't know, we know that we can learn as much as possible. Doing that allowed us for a successful take on Shark Tank, and allowed us for a pretty solid 7 or 8 years after that. And like I said, I think it laid the foundation for how our business would be run. Specifically speaking, when we hire new people, when we take on a new franchisee, when we go into a new city, when we have a new grand opening, inevitably problems come, right? We have so many people in line, which we're grateful for in a new city, but the service isn't right, or the training wasn't perfect, or we hire a new person and it's about finding their way in the office and where their interests and skill sets align with what the business needs. There's always a feeling out, there's always a learning curve, and the fact that we always say that we're certainly not perfect, and we know that, allows us that ability to always be diving deeper and trying to learn more. So that can find its way into the 2020 version of our operations manual. That is the Bible of how our business runs. And that to me is a really interesting piece of always kind of having that understanding of how we want our business to run and operate and evolve, just like we did in 2012 when we just went on Shark Tank. So that's one piece that I really think is certainly very important when it comes to preparing yourself.